Christos anesti negrum fanato
It's a great question, in part because of the use of the word witness, the martyrdom of Lewis's life, and there's the amazing thing about Lewis I found, and I'm sure you did too, is that there's a sense in which you read him as a child, and you read the Narnia Tales at a child's level, and that's wonderful. And then as you graduate into starting to think about the faith, you read the apologetics, and you start to get some mental muscle and some approaches to perennial questions that he handles expertly. But if you go on into, say, scholarship or English literature, you realize he's there too, already having surveyed the landscape, again with an expert eye, and you realize he's always thought through things to a degree and at a level and depth that precedes you. He's always ahead of you. In that sense, there's a real way in which he can be a guide as you grow and come across different questions as you mature is maybe too strong a word, as you get on in life. And Lewis is always getting bigger as you get bigger. And he kind of described Aslan in much the same way, that he increases as you go deeper in life. And one of the things that Orthodox can see in Lewis's own biographical life, the witness of the many martyrdoms that constituted his life, and maybe it's unfair to call them many, because when you consider them, they're quite significant. First, his fidelity. For somebody who's too easily tarred and feathered as a misogynist or kind of insensitive to women, it's remarkable to look at Lewis's life from a young teenager who fought in World War I, and with his close companion and fellow soldier, Patty Moore, they made a mutual agreement to take care of each other's parents should they die. So if Lewis died, Patty Moore would take care of Lewis's father, and if Patty Moore died, which he did, Lewis agreed to take care of Mrs. Moore. And here is a 19-year-old or 20-year-old who, after the war, once the man died, went on and actually fulfilled his promise. And Lewis is at this point, something of an agnostic. He's not a flourishing Christian, but he went to fulfill his promise and to stay with a woman who was not his mother, but became a kind of mother figure, and to take care of her financially, doing chores, domestically, just being a kind of intellectual companion to this woman for 30 some odd years later. While it may have been a little more congenial when Mrs. Moore was younger, as she grew older, she became more difficult to take care of, as many older people typically do, with her sicknesses and struggles. And the fact that Lewis stayed faithful to a pledge that he made to his wartime brother for those 30 years, and didn't put her in a home, didn't leave and say, you're interfering with my career, didn't grumble about Mrs. Moore to as many people as he possibly could. And that is a successive and progressive witness or martyrdom. Going home every day from a beautiful, stunning, intellectually stimulating college, every afternoon to go home and do dishes, chop wood, help and do domestic chores. It's a regular and persistent witness of how to honor your father and your mother. And he did that so beautifully with her. On the professional side, there was also a kind of martyrdom and witness. And it was frequently commented by his colleagues that Lewis would have done a lot better to have written more scholarly works like The Allegory of Love and English the Oxford History of English Literature in the 16th century, more books that were just straightforward academic books, and fewer books that would have been the popular apologetics that he did. But what's amazing is that having fought and lived through World War One, where within his own group, um, something like 1 out of 5 survived, and out of his Oxford trained officer group, having already gone through that, and then lived through the leaner years of the 1930s, and then all of a sudden, one's facing the German invasion of your own country and the prospect of your capital being bombed. Lewis, was able to see that he had a role he could still play even as a young 40-year-old man. He enlisted for the Home Guard, so he couldn't quite fight on the front, so to speak. But he volunteered to the local military groups to say, can I speak to the cadets? Can I speak to the pilots? Can I assist them and encourage them? Because they're likely going off to fight and to die. And the core conviction behind Lewis for those types of actions was that Christianity, as Walter Hooper once said, Christianity is a fighting religion, and that just as England was being threatened by Nazi forces and Axis forces, so Western Europe was being threatened by other forces which were attempting quite successfully to de-Christianize both England and Europe, and that he wanted to do something about it, and that he would use his intellectual skills to try and articulate a Christian faith that would have intellectual muster for the everyday person, particularly the soldier who was going off to fight and perhaps would never come back. So what this does is that puts an immense strain on his personal life, but it also exchanges his productivity, to use modern research jargon. It exchanges that productivity that he could have had writing academic articles and putting out academic books, and instead he's writing books like The Problem of Pain or Mere Christianity or The Great Divorce or the Space Trilogy, and writing books that would give people hope in his own country in a very, very very bleak time. You know, today in 2018, it's really common to kind of cry chicken little and see the sky falling within American culture and within our Western world. And okay, there's something to that, but could you imagine living in World War II England, going through another world war after the previous generation of young men had been wiped out, going through another spate of rationing, facing the prospect that Hitler was going to take over your own country just as he had rapidly taken over the mainland countries? And what do you do then? I mean, could you imagine that? And in the face of that, Lewis witnessed. He witnessed to the Christian faith. He witnessed to the higher values beyond that of mere survival and of mere biological life. And he witnessed that to everybody he possibly could, not to just the university elite, but to the people in the pubs and the people in the trenches. And that kind of witness is striking because it cost him dearly academically. It's in part why his home university, Oxford, never gave him the professorship, which is kind of like a titled chair, even at the summation of his career, when he was a household name throughout England and had written serious academic books and was more than deserving of an academic professorship within the University Oxford English faculty. But it took Cambridge, a distant university, to recognize his merits and to take him on and to give him the kind of status that his work deserved. So he sacrificed a great deal of his professional standing in order to witness to the Christian faith. And that's a sacrifice that tends to get repeated in many generations and will still be so. So one way in which he was certainly a beautiful and effective witness.